Now I have to say, I was really on the fence about upgrading to this camera, and that's why I waited a couple of years to do so. And there were a couple of reasons for that. Naturally, one of those was the price. And then the other is that the Sony A7R V shares the same sensor as the A7R IV. So I was kind of on the fence. I'm like, is it really that much of an upgrade if it's sharing the same sensor? It doesn't have the greatest readout speed, which kind of makes the silent shutter not all that useful. And then there's also some issues with rolling shutter. But then over the holidays, they significantly dropped the price of this camera. Here in the US, I think they dropped it $900 off of the MSRP. And then on top of that, I was able to negotiate another $400 to $500 off. So at that price point, this camera cost way less than when I purchased the R4, and it became sort of a no-brainer to purchase it. And I also looked in a little bit more to what actually changed in this camera. And I have to say, it's kind of like once you pop the hood and you start looking at the enhancements that they added, it's pretty much everything other than the sensor got a pretty significant upgrade. And we'll talk about that more as we wander around Brackett's farm today. Got a pair of Canadian geese out here. They don't seem too excited that I'm here. Oh, there's a red-winged blackbird right here down by the water. We've got a reflection of him as he's there nibbling on some bugs, and the eye detection autofocus is picking them up. So I have to say, when I picked up this camera, probably the first few things I noticed is there's a few changes here on the body, and the probably most talked about feature is this 4-axis articulating screen. And I would say that this is probably an industry-leading feature because you can flip it and then you can also tilt it. And most screens do one or the other, and this does both. That was a really nice upgrade. The other thing is the EVF on this camera. The Sony A7R IV, I think, had a 5.76 million dot EVF. This one is 9.44 million dots, and that makes for a really nice experience when you're looking through your EVF. One of the other things here is the door for your memory cards. They added the lock on it, which to me is a really welcomed upgrade. I have noticed a few times when I was shooting the R4 where I accidentally knocked the door loose. And then the other thing here is on the dial wheel, there's a dedicated photo and video mode. And I really like that because then you can have your settings dialed in for photo or video, and you can switch between them pretty effortlessly. Just see this red-winged blackbird that just landed in some cattails. It looks kind of neat, but it's just a little bit far to reach out to from here. But I have to say, one of the first things I noticed when I picked up the R5 and took it out on a shoot is the improvements in the autofocus. And the reason for that is not only did they update the processor to the Bion X or something like that, but it's like 8 times faster than the one in the R4, but they also added a separate dedicated processor for AI autofocus. And that's really made a big difference when it comes to subject recognition. And I think it makes a big difference, especially if you do birding, because there'll be like a bird on a tree limb, there'll be branches around it, and I'll be able to pick out the bird even with the limbs around it. And when I was shooting the A7R IV, I'd have to use the smallest focus box that the camera has, and even with that, the camera a lot of times would fight me in trying to grab focus on the subject. But here with the R5, it's a lot more intelligent, and I can sometimes even use a larger focus box, and the camera can still realize that it's a bird I'm trying to focus on, and even it's a lot better at grabbing eye autofocus on the bird. You know, is there still room for it to get better? Sure, but it is significantly better, and I think if you do birding and wildlife, you're going to be really happy with that improvement. Sometimes there'll be some osprey hanging out, and I did see, I heard a belted kingfisher earlier. I see there's a bird up across the way here, across this marsh, up high, but it's just too far out to get a good image of. So we'll wander back a little bit further and see what else we can find. Primarily like to do photography, but I also enjoy grabbing video clips of birds. And when I was shooting the A7R IV, it was very difficult to get any video clips handheld. It was just, there would be so much like wobble in the footage that even if I pulled it into my video editing software, it wasn't salvageable. But now with the R5, I'm finding that I'm able to get some video clips, and with a little bit of stabilization, they're very usable. And the reason for that is they updated the IBIS. On the R4, it was rated for 5.5 stops, and here on the R5, it's rated for 8 stops. And that's a pretty significant difference. It really helps a lot. Hopefully you can see that, but that is this new menu system that the R5 has. It's one of Sony's newer menu systems that they're putting in their higher end cameras. And this menu I'm showing you right now is what they, I think, call the main menu. And I have to say, I really like that. It gives you the ability to get to a lot of your often used menu items without having to dig into the menu, and it's touch screen, so you can just tap on it and go right to it. The other thing that I really like in this upgrade, I also have a Sony A7R IV, and it has this control wheel here with the dedicated photo and video like they added on the R5. But the issue is for me on that camera is when I put it into the recording formats for the SD cards and I set them to simultaneous recording, in photo mode, I'd switch to video mode and it seemed to default back to just recording to one card. And then I'd do the same thing and vice versa. I'd go back to photo and it'd be back to single card again. And that just drove me nuts. So that has been addressed, and in the R5, it doesn't seem to do that. Now that might just be something that I didn't understand how to set properly, but I tried Googling it and I found that super frustrating on the A7 IV. The other thing that I should mention is that besides the SD card slots, it has the dual card slots that can also take CF Express A. Now I don't have any CF Express A cards yet because I have a lot of SD cards and they're a lot cheaper, but I do see myself in the future wanting to upgrade to the CF Express A cards, so I'm really glad that they future-proof this by doing that. And some of the benefits of those cards being much faster is you're able to unload your buffer. And speaking of buffer, I think on the A7R IV you could get about 80 images before the buffer filled up. Now if you're using the CF Express A cards, I think you can get around 570 or close to 600 images before your buffer's filled. And then with those fast cards, it'll unload the buffer really quick. So I don't think most people pick up the Sony A7R V thinking of it as a great hybrid camera. But with some of the updates that this camera got, like I mentioned, the improved IBIS, they also improved a lot of specs on the video side that now make it a pretty decent hybrid camera. Now you're not going to pick this up if video is primarily what you do, but if you like to shoot some video, it does a really good job. The nice thing is they added 10-bit, so you can shoot 10-bit 422. For me, this is kind of a big deal because, like I said, I also have an A7 IV and now actually also an A7 V. And if I'm filming something and want to be able to match the footage, it's nice to be able to shoot 10-bit in both of those. Another feature they added is 8K that can go to 24p. I don't know how often I'll use that, but it's nice to have that option. And you now also have 4K 60. It is cropped, but in 10-bit, it's really nice to be able to have that finally on this camera. When you start adding up all these different features that they've improved, this camera has become a really decent hybrid camera. It's definitely more a photography camera first, but it is very capable. And I have to say, making the switch from the A7R IV to now the A7R V, I've been really happy. I'm glad that I've added this to my kit. I've found that it's much easier for me to grab pictures of birds, like I said, that have some branches around them that before were images I just weren't gonna capture. This time of year, it's really hard to sneak up on birds. There's no foliage on the trees, and they see you coming from what seems like a mile away. Oh, some ducks. So I have to say I've been really happy with this upgrade to the Sony A7R V. And as I've already mentioned, when you start adding up all of the features that did get enhanced, it's a pretty significant upgrade, and I think very much worthwhile. I definitely think that the R5 is a way better camera than the A7R IV, even though they both shared the same sensor. And it's just when you start adding that together, like the improved AI autofocus, the enhanced IBIS, the dedicated photo and video mode, the updated menus, the improved EVF, the articulating display. I mean, it is just such a better camera. And if you primarily shoot landscape, the upgrade might not be worthwhile for you. But if you shoot wildlife, especially birds, and even if you shoot portraits, I've noticed when I've used it on portrait shoots, the AI autofocus works so much better where the focus point should be. So even if it's not picking up the eye, it knows where the eye should be. If it loses the eye, it switches to the head. If the body turns, it just picks up the entire body. But it's able to understand kind of the shape of the subject it's shooting and prioritize the autofocus for that. So that, and then like I said, all the video modes, it's actually a really reasonable hybrid camera now. It's not going to be your camera for shooting fast action because rolling shutter is an issue with the slower readout speed of the sensor, and the silent shutter isn't really that usable because of the slower sensor. But if you use it for what it's good at, you're going to be so happy with what this camera can do for you. And I'm also excited to see what they bring out in the R6. But in the meantime, if you pick up this camera at a good price point, I think you probably should jump on it. At least I'm very glad that I did. And let me know what your thoughts are. Are you going to jump on the R5? Did you already? Are you happy that you made the change? Have you been impressed with the features that got improved? I think it's been a really great upgrade. Anyway, catch you later. Bye.